Hello everyone and welcome back to Talking Wild. I am your host, Stefano Daza, and I'm so excited to have you here today for episode 4 of our Zeyba podcast. Before we get started, I'd like to thank everyone who has been tuning in for our weekly episodes. If you'd like to support our Talking Wild channel and our other Zeyba projects, head over to our website at zeybaapparel.com to shop your favorite Zeyba collections. I'm also very excited to share that after much anticipation, our next collection, Ecosystems, will be finally dropping next week, so be on the lookout for what might be our best collection to date. Alright, on today's episode, I'm joined by my friend, Jak Maliszewski. Jak is what I like to call an environmental generalist, and you'll see exactly why during our conversation. He is a biologist and a conservationist who works with both wildlife and humans to explore new outlets for conservation. He has a Bachelors of Science degree from the University of Wisconsin and is currently finishing his master's in conservation biology from the University of Miami. During our conversation, Jak and I cover his conservation experiences abroad and how they have molded him into the environmentalist that he is today. We touch on his current research into plastic pollution and how to live a plastic-free life. I believe that Jak's experiences will be of great value to aspiring biologists who are looking to get their career started in conservation. So without further ado, I bring to you episode 4 of Talking Wild. All right, so today on the podcast, I have a good friend of mine, Jak. Jak, welcome to the Talking Wild podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you, bro. So first off, I met Jak, 4 years ago when we were in the Galapagos?
Yeah, that must have been like 2016 or something, right?
Yeah, 2016 when we were studying abroad. Jak actually dyed my hair blonde with house-grade bleach from a little convenience store on the island, and that's what cemented our friendship forever. But that's not the reason why I have Jak on today. Jak is actually one of the most interesting conservationists that I personally know. His story is like so diverse, and we're going to hit on so many fascinating topics that I think will be very valuable to aspiring conservationists and environmentalists and biologists. So I'm super excited to get started, dude.
Me too. Thank you so much. You're so kind. My goodness.
What are you drinking?
I'm having a Truly right now because it's summer.
Nice. I'm having a Corona beer because there's a pandemic called coronavirus.
Yeah, I've heard about it.
If you didn't know.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers, man. So let's start with a little bit about your background, who you are, what you do, and how you got into what you do.
Yeah, for sure. So I am from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is sort of the Midwest of the United States. And since I was really little, all I wanted to do was work with animals and travel. So I grew up thinking that I needed to be like a veterinarian or something. But fortunately, when I was doing my undergrad degree at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, I had a really cool professor who got me into doing research. And I learned pretty quick that like working with wildlife and doing research is exactly what I wanted to do, which is what led me to doing my semester in the Galapagos, really.
So what kind of research did you start off doing? Like, what was the research that got you into it?
Well, what I wanted to do is I really wanted to work with frogs way back when, and there was this lab that ran this experiment with frogs, and they would study female preferences for mate calls. But it just happened that the semester I wanted to get into it was full, but the person who ran that lab was married to a insect researcher. So she like sent me down the hall, and I ended up working with bugs for like, I don't know, 2-3 years.
Wow. And then you went off to the Galapagos to get some field experience, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So do you think that experience in the Galapagos shaped you or shaped your career in conservation in any particular way?
For sure, because it was the first time that I was like thrown into an atmosphere that I was surrounded by like-minded people who cared about conservation and cared about wildlife. And for the first time, I was learning, from people how what you eat can make a difference, what you work with can make a difference. And it turned that research wasn't just research because I wanted to work with animals, but what do you do with your research after you're done with it?
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring it up because there's a couple people, there's two schools of thoughts in the sciences. And the first is doing research to apply that research towards something and finding a solution to a big problem. And then the other one is research just for the sake of learning new things.
Right.
So where do you think you fall on that spectrum?
I think, maybe somewhere in the middle that sometimes research for the sake of research is important and great, and it helps us learn about things as, a civilization, as humanity. But I think, research with implications and research with your cause is what we need right now, really.
Yeah. So you've been able to travel a lot to different places, and we're going to
Hmm.
touch on like all the cool places that you traveled to and the kind of experiences that you've had abroad. But
Hmm.
how do you think travel has um, impacted you and kind of what you like to do, the kind of work that you're doing as a conservationist?
My goodness. I think conservation has, or traveling has taught me so much about conservation, because you're going to these places around the world where you're seeing these small community-based conservation efforts, and you're seeing people really, try to make changes and care about their, natural habitat. And being able to experience that all over the globe is not only rewarding in teaching us about what conservation is going on the planet, but also what conservation we can do when we go back home.
Right. For me at least, my experiences abroad have really, like, each experience has led me down a path of where I want to go
Hmm.
with my future. So, for example, it wasn't until I first went to Africa that I realized that I was really into wildlife conservation. I loved seeing animals and working with animals, and to me, it was very awakening to see that these animals that I love so much were losing, a lot of habitat or were getting poached. So I knew that I wanted to dedicate the rest of my life to helping preserve wildlife. Um, have you had similar experiences, like any specific time that you traveled abroad, that you learned something that you were like, this is what I want to do, or this is the kind of direction that I want to go down in?
Yeah, for sure. I went to, I think it was 2017. I went down to Peru and I volunteered at a monkey sanctuary. I really wanted to work with monkeys, but I never actually had any hands-on experience with them. So I went to this sanctuary in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, and no technology, or no electricity, no running water. Months with collecting rainwater, boiling it, and drinking it. But the
That's
people
wild.
there, yeah, it was crazy and it was great. But the people there dedicated their lives to rescuing monkeys, rehabilitating them, and releasing them back into the wild. And that was, you know, okay, that was something I saw, and I was like, okay, I could be part of this. I could do this. This is what I want to contribute to.
What kind
And
of
that, go ahead.
what kind of research were you doing with the monkeys?
That was before my research. I knew I wanted to do research with monkeys, but
Oh,
I had
okay.
never worked with monkeys before. So I had a researcher tell me, you want to work with monkeys? Well, then go out there and get some experience. So I flew to Peru. I spent a couple months in the rainforest, and I just worked with howler monkeys, saki monkeys, tamarins, spider monkeys, you name it, just to
Awesome.
get that experience.
And for the people who like follow Zeyba on Instagram, and this is where you took that really cool picture with the Zeyba shirt with the spider monkey holding a spider monkey, right?
Yeah, yep, that's right.
That's gotta be like one of my favorite Zeyba pictures, dude. That's Zeyba gang from the very start.
Yeah, for real.
Cool. So I think this is a good little topic that we should elaborate on because a lot of young aspiring conservationist, because the field of conservation is so big in scope and it covers, like environmentalism and all sorts of things. I think it's really good for people to try their hand in as many opportunities as they can, because you might go into your university experience thinking that you want to do lab research, but then once you actually have experience in that lab, you might realize that you absolutely hate lab work and you want to do field work. Or it might be the opposite. You might love lab work, and that just confirms your original idea of what you wanted to do. But unless you try things, you really won't know what to expect. So I really like that point of the monkey research and what you did there. So were you able to work with monkeys after Peru?
Yeah, just in January, I was in Paraguay. I was working with a primate researcher there, Becca Smith, and I started developing a research project with the howler monkeys there that live. There's a group that lives in the city, and there's a group that lives out of the city, and we were looking at if noise levels in the city, motorcycles, cars, music, affected the way that howler monkeys communicate and vocalize compared to when they live in the wild. And I started, yeah, it was really cool, and I was hoping to go there in September and to do like 4 months of collecting data. But we'll see how that plays out. Maybe that'll be pushed back to 2021.
Right. Coronavirus has really taken a hit on all your travel plans, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really, really has. But, there's silver linings to everything, so.
Right. So one thing that I want to talk about, you told me that you were a member of the LGBTQ community. And this is really interesting because although I think, and then you can tell me your opinion on it, that as scientists and conservationists, we ourselves are a very open and accepting community. But how have you found your experience as LGBTQ to be when you're traveling abroad to all these places? Tell us.
Yeah, I mean, and it can be tricky. And I will say that in like the field of biology, in the field of, animal behavior and conservation, people tend to be more liberal thinking, and I've never really faced discrimination in my field, which is fantastic. But for people of the LGBT community who want to get into conservation and travel, it's something to be mindful of, that you may be going to parts of the world where it's not necessarily accepted or not necessarily something that people are educated about. And especially if you're staying with host families, or if you're traveling and you're staying at research centers, you might have to deal with, I don't know, I hate to say the idea of like going back in the closet or hiding your identity, because that can be very triggering or hurtful to people of the community. But like, you have to be really careful, and you have to take care of yourself before you can start taking care of, animals or ecosystems. Right. So, I mean, in a lot of cases, I go to a country and I have to kind of like check that identity until you feel out, the people in your environment. But especially, right, especially, yeah, exactly. But if there's things like language barriers or cultural barriers, and it can be hard to read the people around you. But really, the more you travel, the more you get to like experience cultures abroad. You kind of like get an idea of, okay, when is it safe? When is it, okay to say something? And that comes with, experience, really.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had any negative experiences because of your who you are, your identity?
For sure, absolutely, 100%. I think anybody of any sort of minority group can agree to that. But I mean, the thing is about removing yourself from those situations, but granted, also when you're most yourself, when you're most authentically who you are, you're going to attract people who accept you regardless,
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not just with LGBTQ community. When you travel abroad anywhere, as as people in our field often do, you have to be open to new experiences and just the new world, new cultures. They're so vastly different than what we have here at home. And if you are aren't able to adapt, you're not going to thrive in those environments. So you have to be like a chameleon, and be able to quickly shape yourself to your new surroundings. And you specifically, like when we were in Ecuador, you had a little bit of an advantage because you were able to travel before and you were pretty good in Spanish, right?
Yeah.
So you were able to communicate with the locals. And how has that experience been with you traveling to other places? Like when you went to Japan, how did you adapt to such a different culture?
Well, the thing is, Japan's a little different. I've been going to Japan for summer, like since I was like 19. I would go there and teach English over there during summer. So I do know a fair bit of Japanese. But the first time I went, total culture shock. You misinterpret so many things. I have so many memories of me like all over the world traveling, just like the cringiest things I've done or said, like, cultural faux pas and like, but it happens and that's how you learn, that's part of traveling is you make mistakes and like you figure things out and then you're better equipped for the future. But part of it is learning about the culture before you go. If you're going to go into Japan and expect to be a rowdy American, you're going to get looks on the subway. But if you go in, respect the culture and sort of act as you see people acting around you, you're going to blend in a little bit better to an extent.
They say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do.
Right, exactly.
So another thing that I want to kind of pick your brain on is for those people that are looking to get experience abroad, what is a good way to get started with that process, finding opportunities? What kind of opportunities should they be looking for? There's a lot of experiences that make you pay a lot of money to do these things. Is that necessary? Because a lot of people, and especially after coronavirus, won't be in a good situation to pay a lot of money to get, some research experience and some field experience under the belt. So what are your suggestions when going through this process?
Yeah, and I think that's really important for people to hear also coming straight out of college too. As like a biologist coming out of college, you think, okay, now time to, get in the field and start doing work. And it doesn't work that way. And a lot of times what we're expected to do, whether you're going down the research path or whether you're going down, animal husbandry or animal welfare or care, you have to work for free for what feels like years before you actually get to some place where you're doing what you want to do. And so after I graduated from my undergrad, I took, I think 2-3 years before I went back for my master's. And during those 3 years, I was applying literally monthly. I'd be applying like 10 different internships, volunteer positions, and just putting all the feelers out there. I would send emails to the specific sanctuaries and avoid any like third-party websites that are, focused on getting conservation or young conservationists in for, manual labor, free labor, or even, paying thousands of dollars to go work someplace. Email a conservation organization that you're passionate about directly. Ask them if they have any sort of accommodations for people who would want to come, spend time there, work for them, and learn about what they're doing, and figure out what you can contribute to them instead of just figuring out where can you go and get the experience too.
Right. So I completely agree with that. My first time when I went to Africa, I had just graduated high school. I was going into college, and I had always wanted to go to Africa and go on a safari, but do some kind of conservation work. And I fell right into that trap of finding a website that takes you through a third party to volunteer at like a wildlife area, wildlife reserve. But not only are you volunteering for free, but you're actually paying to be a part of that volunteer program. So essentially, it's not even volunteering. It's just like discount tourism,
Yeah.
But, once I did it and I was there and I learned about it, and I went to Africa, I saw opportunities to actually work at reserves or organizations the next time around for free or even get paid while doing it. So, in a sense, I'm kind of glad that I had that experience because then it opened my eyes to that kind of world of discount volunteerism or discount tourism. And then the next year, I was able to do an internship. I wasn't paid, but I didn't have to pay, and I got some incredible experience in Botswana and the Okavango. And then the following year, by building on those prior experiences, I was able to get an actual job in a wildlife reserve in South Africa. So, I got those by networking with the people that I had met on my first two adventures abroad, and directly approaching them and telling them, because there is opportunity if you look under the rocks and if you're willing to do the work and stay in touch with people and connect with people. You just have to be very self-motivated and reach out to people and look for as many opportunities as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Actually.
And I think for, first time traveling or like conservation work abroad, those, pay to work programs can be really helpful. They're great for networking and they take care of you really well. But eventually you get to a place where like, okay, I can buy my own flights, I can buy my own accommodations, I can figure out how I'm going to get there. And I don't need a third party to figure that all out for me, And that's where the charge really comes from.
Exactly. And, if you have the resources to pay to work and you're willing to do that, like, kudos. Like, you're going to probably learn a lot than if you didn't even take that experience in the first hand. But after a certain point, you are going to get to the point that you have to either stop paying for those or get paid in order to survive and actually make a career out of it, or, go forth in your conservation plans. So thank you for elaborating a little bit on those experiences. Let's move on to our next topic. So when you were traveling abroad, you were able to go to some of the wildest places in the world. And you noticed that a lot of these places were polluted. So tell us a little bit about what you saw, where you saw it, and what led to what after seeing it.
Yeah, for sure. So like during those like 3 years between my like undergrad and my master's, I was, going back to Japan. I was doing research internships in Taiwan. I was traveling to Thailand, Cambodia. I spent some time in like the Amazon rainforest, traveling through Ecuador and Peru. And no matter where I went, it was amazing. But you get to these places and you're like at this, beautiful desert, and there's, Coca-Cola bottles in the sand. You're at like the Amazon River, someplace as like a child I dreamed of going. And there is styrofoam containers drifting down the river, and I'm thinking I'm hours away from civilization, and here there is still the impact of like human plastic pollution. And it like broke my heart, but it also like really fueled me to think like, okay, so what are we going to do about it? And that's why like after that, no matter where I went, whether I was going to a park or the beach or anywhere, I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick up as much as I can and do my part to, start cleaning up the environments around me. And this past year, I finally moved back to Milwaukee after like, years of traveling, seeing all these places and coming back to my own community. And now I start walking down the street here and I see plastic and garbage everywhere. And in my head, it's no different than really, granted, the Amazon rainforest is amazing and such a biodiverse place, but just as much as we need conservationists there working, we need conservationists in our own small communities, making changes as well.
Exactly. I think a lot of us probably come from, rural or somewhere in America, and we have this idea that to be a conservationist, you have to be in the Amazon rainforest or in the savannas of Africa doing work there. But in reality, a lot of the pollution and a lot of the problems that you see out there are very much alive in your own communities. And if you're not able to take care of the problems in your own backyard, how do you expect to solve the issues abroad? So I love the fact that you just mentioned that. You have to be a good caretaker of your home before wanting to do it somewhere else, So cheers to that. So
right.
Your passion, or not your passion, but your experience seeing plastics pollution abroad led you to come back to back home, and now you're pursuing a master's from the University of Miami, right?
Yeah, well, actually, Miami University. Two different schools,
Miami
but yes.
University. Okay. And what is your master's focused on? Plastic pollution?
Well, yeah, so my master's is focused in conservation, and it's through a program called Project Dragonfly, which is a really awesome program. Every year you get to choose one of their Earth expedition courses, and you get to do a study abroad trip going to these different countries that have really, really powerful conservation organizations. And you get to learn from them and then apply what you learned there to whatever conservation topic and project of your choice. And I've really taken it upon myself to try to figure out why plastic pollution is so bad in Milwaukee. So I've really been diving into that. At first, it started with me looking into what is the most abundant types of plastic pollution found on Lake Michigan, then trying to figure out what is the waste management system infrastructure currently like here. Why is this plastic not getting recycled? Then to figure out what types of alternatives we can use. Everybody's talking about, these biodegradable, compostable plastics that are extremely eco-friendly. And then I found out that all of these eco-friendly products are ending up in landfills still and contributing to our methane problems. So I started talking to compost facilities in the area, asking them why don't they accept, these biodegradable, compostable plastics. And they told me, well, nobody knows how long they take to break down. And on top of that, if they take these compostable plastics, then their byproduct, the manure that they sell or like the fertilizer that they sell is no longer organic, and nobody's going to want to buy, non-organic fertilizer.
Really?
So now, yeah. So they essentially want to take in these biodegradable, compostable plastics and find a way to break them down the way that they're meant to, the way that they're designed to, and then being able to sell fertilizer from that. But like the alternative is if we could talk to government officials, if we could get a bill passed. There was a bill passed in Illinois where the city had to use compostable material for all of their city-funded projects. And if Milwaukee had something like that, it would just open up doors for compost facilities to actually be able to use these biodegradable, compostable plastics, and then therefore, stop things from going to the landfill even further. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on right now.
So that's what you're doing your master's on.
Yeah, but I think part of that too is, educating the public. Most people aren't even aware, how to properly dispose of, eco-friendly products.
Yeah.
So I'm also trying to. Okay, go ahead.
Let's dive into that.
Sure.
Once you came back home,
Mm-hmm.
what did you realize was the biggest source of plastic pollution in your area? Like, what was contributing to the plastic pollution that you were finding?
Yeah, well, like I wish it was a surprising answer, but it's, plastic bottles, plastic bottle caps, plastic silverware, plastic straws, plastic bags. These are like the items that you're going to find most on Lake Michigan. And Lake Michigan is so beautiful, so it's such a shame to see like this terrible plastic totally like taking away from the natural beauty.
And how is it making its way there? Are people just like throwing it out and it finds its way through the water streams, or like how does it end up in the lake?
Yeah, well, and there's multiple ways. So in the ocean, we have all these currents that, pulls all the plastic over, so things are able to travel more. In Lake Michigan, we don't really have that. So the plastic problem that exists there is more self-contained. It's from the regions and the cities surrounding the lake. But Wisconsin is such a huge wetland area. There's so many watersheds, rivers. So really the pollution that is anywhere near the shore is going to end up in the lake eventually, whether it's from, if there's flooding, heavy rains, from waterways, from sewers, it's going to make its way there.
Okay, that's good to know. When people want to help out, we see a lot of initiatives to recycle, to turn in your cans and your bottles for, dimes or 25 cents or whatever it is. How effective are those methods? How effective is weekly recycling for homes? Do you think that that is a good way to combat plastic pollution? And if, what can we do to build on it so that it's more effective?
I think recycling, when it's done properly, can be extremely, extremely effective. But what I've noticed is like a lot of people aren't aware, and myself included. During this process, I went to go tour our recycling facility in Milwaukee, only to realize, maybe 30% of the things that I was recycling, the recycling facility didn't even accept.
Really?
So a lot of, because I think they accept, number ones, number threes, and number fives plastic. So which means number twos, number fours, number seven, all of those end up going to the landfill and can't be recycled. And the reason that is because the recycling facility is going to take all of that stuff, break it down, and they're going to sell it to another organization who's going to use it for a product. If the market isn't there to buy that plastic, they're not going to recycle it.
Exactly.
So, exactly. So it kind of, it can be difficult. And, I'm sitting in this room and somebody's explaining to me that unless you perfectly wash something and recycle it, it's going to get thrown away. If you put things into plastic bags and then recycle it, they're just going to throw the whole thing away because they don't have time to sort through that. So I think for people who want to be successful recyclers, you have to go out of your way to educate yourself and figure out exactly what your community accepts and doesn't accept. And then for those things that it doesn't accept, can you find alternatives to them,
Yeah. So how do you do that? How do you educate the community on how to properly dispose of their plastics?
Well, I think a lot of it, and education is a huge part of my life. I work in an education department for a zoo, so I constantly work with children and do different conservation classes. And I think working with kids is so important because these are the people who are going to not only carry on what we do, but also innovate it, change it,
Right.
And I think these are the people who are going to be able to take what we have now and make it actually 10 times more sustainable. So I've been doing different classes in Milwaukee, going into schools, teaching kids about recycling. We pick their favorite marine animal and we learn all about the ocean. They get to design and color a huge ocean mural. And then all week they think of all the things that they recycle and all the things that they throw away. And then on our ocean mural, we put our animals up and we show one side of the ocean with thumbprints for everything that we threw away and we recycled. And then on the other side, just the things that we threw away. And this shows the kids how our oceans can look when we properly recycle, they're nice and clean. And then their favorite animals, when we don't recycle, are going to be swimming with plastic pollution.
Wow.
And I think this really helps kids rationalize, one, they have to, build a connectedness with nature. We can think that teaching kids to conserve the planet is super important, but unless they feel connected to the planet, they're not going to want to make changes, right?
Exactly. All change starts from a personal relationship connection with something. If you're not passionate about it, there is no way that you're going to care enough to change your behavior positively to cause change. So the natural follow-up question to that is, what about adults? How do you reach out to adults so that they have this similar realization of plastic, and how do they become better citizens and waste disposers?
Yeah. Well, and I wish I was the perfect expert and I had the exact answer how to change adult humans' minds, but that's still a struggle that I try to learn every day. I think
Right.
social media is really powerful. We have, the outlet to connect with a lot of different people and share information. I think also with traveling and going to different communities, and I am not a bougie traveler. I am staying at $6 hostels, sharing a room with 10 other people. But when you do that, you have the opportunity to connect with people from all over the world and have really great interpersonal relationships and share information about, the planet, recycling. And because that's how I got started. When I went to the Galapagos and people told me about, plant-based diets and people told me about, beach cleanups, I started thinking, okay, this is stuff I can do. it took me meeting those people on a study abroad trip. And if I just could think about every, interaction I have as those same crucial study abroad interactions, you can spread the message further, and you might change somebody's life who down the line, they might have another person that they meet and share that information with.
It really goes back to this, the importance of traveling and realizing that the world isn't just like endless. It might be a big world, but when you go to the Galapagos, an isolated archipelago in the middle of the Pacific, and you see plastic pollution washing up from the shores of, South America or Central America or even North America onto the shores of this like pristine, beautiful island or islands, you realize that the world is very much interconnected, and what you choose to do in one place will most definitely affect a very distant place. And once you realize those things firsthand, you become much more aware of your actions and the consequences that you have. So this goes back to the theme of traveling and the importance of traveling, and how traveling can really affect your point of view on the world and kind of what you want to dedicate the rest of your life to. Awesome. Another thing that I really wanted to touch on that I thought was super interesting was that you decided to go plastic free for a while. Tell us a little bit about how that was, how you decided to do that, how you did that, and like if other people are interested, how would they go about doing it?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, plastic free, there's no perfect way to be plastic free. So I can say that I'm plastic free, but still plastic, is something that I fight with every day of my life.
Right.
We live in a plastic society.
Plastic is what makes everything possible right now.
Right. So I think the idea of plastic free, people think it's like an all or nothing, that like unless you're completely plastic free, you're failing. And why even try? Because it's going to be impossible. But the idea is to make small changes, right? Is to make those gradually over time. And that's what I did, especially if you're somebody who travels a lot. A lot of times you have to get these travel size shampoo bottles, this travel size toothbrush, and you can end up creating so much waste. And if you're traveling the world and learning all about these amazing cultures and amazing ecosystems, we don't want to be the ones contributing to what is essentially, killing our planet.
Exactly.
So I've taken it upon myself to try to educate myself about alternatives to single-use plastic. And, there isn't a place I go without a water bottle. I've got a bamboo toothbrush. I've got, I get toothpaste tablets that come in a glass jar. I have floss that's biodegradable. I have, bamboo utensils that I bring with me when I travel everywhere. It's extremely possible. And so when I was going to Belize, I thought, okay, I'm going to Belize for a month. Can I go the whole time without any sort of plastic products? I was fortunate that I was going through a program that somebody was cooking me meals throughout the day, that I didn't have to, worry about going to a store. But on the weekends when I would go to a store, using a reusable bag, buying fresh produce, buying food that isn't packaged in, a lot of plastic. And then when you do have to buy something in plastic, making sure that that plastic is actually recyclable, checking out if it's something that it can be repurposed in the future. And I went my whole trip in Belize. I think I had one Gatorade bottle from one day that I happened to be dehydrated, but otherwise mission successful. And so I came home and I thought, okay, if I can do that living out of a backpack in Central America, why can't I do that in the comfort of my own hometown,
Yes.
So I just wanted to keep taking it further and further, and coupling, trying to be plastic free with also doing a plant-based diet. What's the next step is, how do you avert your food waste from going to a landfill? And now I'm diving into this whole world of composting, and I'm doing a research project on compost mounds. And asked me 2 years ago, and I'm I am a primate behavioralist. All I want to do is research monkeys. And now I'm diving into plastic pollution, composting, and recycling. But it becomes sort of like a hobby and an obsession a little bit.
That's what I love about you, Jack. You're like a environmental generalist. You have your foot into so many different things, and like you can teach us so much on different issues. And you know, this is a little side point, but if Zeyba ever does any like educational classes or anything, I'm definitely going to reach out to you to lead something like that, because I think that you can be a great educator for people that want to start making those small changes in their daily life to be more environmentally conscious, because we have to start making those changes. The world literally cannot continue surviving on the consumption that we've been doing, you know, whether it be our meat diets or heavy meat diets or our heavy use on plastics. We have to start being more conscious of those decisions. And like you said, that I thought was really good, it starts small. Like you have to first really get down some easy, small habits. And then once you start acquiring some success with those small habits, you can start building on it. And, you know, you start getting more ambitious with what you want to do until you can go a whole trip abroad only, you know, having one Gatorade bottle or whatever it is. So I think that's super inspiring, and I think that people will be really happy to hear that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Awesome, Jack. So I think that was a great conversation. Again, dude, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I think everybody that hears this is going to learn a little bit about whether it be traveling abroad, how to live a more eco-conscious lifestyle, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great talking to you.
All right, buddy. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. You have a good one.
Bye. Join us on future episodes of Talking Wild every Monday as we have more fascinating guests join us to talk about everything nature, wildlife, and conservation. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know by liking and sharing. And if you'd like to support Zeyba, head over to our website at zeybaapparel.com to shop your favorite Zeyba merch. Thank you for joining us, and remember to stay wild.